Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Inuit, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. I would like to introduce the members of the panel, the secretary to the board, and the assessor today. My name is Brent McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the meeting. To my far right is Gisela Rempel, and to my immediate right is Robert Upton. We have a board member observing via Zoom today, Mr. Jerry Arnell. Our assessor is Merrick Froelich, and our secretary today is Stephen Lund. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note that you're placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Border Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's orders. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decision. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on the docket today. Mr. Lund, can you please affirm the assessors and applicants' testimony? Thank you very much.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Merrick Froelich.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, too. The first property on the docket today is 1420 Clarence Avenue. And I understand there's 3 items of appeal.
That is correct.
And that would be classification, liability, and quantum.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Merrick, any preliminary issues on your side?
Actually, Mr. Story and I spoke about this property last night, and there will be a recommendation made on this property. And I have some information, and Mr. Story could confirm the rest of it. So,
okay, well, we'll wait till you make your presentation.
Okay.
Already? Okay, Merrick, you can start.
File number is 22-1143. Roll number is 0307048750. Address is 1420 Clarence Avenue. For 2023 value, the original value was $2,521,000. Property description goes as follows. It's in the southwest quadrant of the city of Winnipeg in the Fort Garry Industrial Park. Built in 1987. Wall height 17 feet. Leasable area is 16,725. The overall value for this property will be $2,375,000, and the breakdown will go as following. The classification for 40cc will be added to the property. That value will be $256,000. The remainder of the property will be 60 T, and that value will be $2,119,000. The new property where the separation takes place, it's a math school for children. And that concludes my formal presentation. If there's anything incorrect there, Jared, can you please confirm for the board?
That is what we discussed, and Mr. Chair, pending client approval, which I don't perceive any issue. We agree with the quantum and the breakdown based on the proportionate share of the GLA occupied by the children's school. So we are in accordance with the assessor's recommendation.
So just to clarify, you're not giving a class code 40S to the Manitoba Home Builders Association?
No, we are not.
Panel, do you have any questions? Robert? No, I don't.
Questions, thank you.
That was my only sort of clarification. So Jared, how are you accepting the recommendation?
We are accepting pending client approval, but for the purpose of our exercise today, we are accepting the assessor's recommendation. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the first item.
Shoot.
What?
No, what ended up happening, I was having some IT issues this morning. And so what ended up taking place is that I had scanned a document with regards to my vital information. And what I realized, the error that I made some file notes with regards to it. And I just want to make sure if you guys can see me. You guys see me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's just that the system was a bit slow. So there's at the very last page of my rebuttal information, there is
What property is this for?
this will be for the entire docket with regards to the Altus had provided us some information with regards to the cap rate study, and I am providing rebuttal information for that.
So we haven't gone to the second property yet. So we're just going to check to see. Have you sent it in?
I am doing that right now as we speak. And I will send a copy to Jared just to save time. Yeah, it's just that those are the issues that I had this morning. So excellent. And unfortunately, Jared.
For recess.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm good to go. I just sent it off, and Jared may want a printed copy of that at some point during your recess when it comes.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess while the document's printed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I will. Thank you. We'll reconvene the hearing this morning. The next property on the docket is 1249 Clarence Avenue, and I'll ask both parties if there's any preliminary issues. Merrick?
Nope.
Merrick? Thank you very much. Merrick, you can proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. File number is 221140. Roll number is 030703500500. Property is 1249 Clarence Avenue. For 2023, the assessed value was $6,195,000. The year built for this property is between 1976 and 2000. Wall heights range from between 12 and 22 feet. And the leasable area is 70,724. Property owner has been compliant with regards to income and expense mailer information. And what I've provided here is I've provided just an overall review of the income for the property. what's interesting here with regard to this property, sometimes the information's clean, sometimes it's not. And this income in the property here for 2020, the net income reported was $495,893. What I've done here is I provided some pictures of the subject property. I got this. This is just information with regards to the what the building looks like. 2-story, single-story building, totaling 70,665 square feet. Buildings were built between 1976 and 79, including extensively renovated to include a second floor and electrical room in 2009. Property is located in the Winnipeg Industrial Park. Property is located in Fort Garry Industrial Park. There's a couple overhead pictures here that we have here. Most of us are familiar with the clearances. On top of page 5, what we have here is we have a listing of one of the tenants there, which is sourced on Neutraco. We have rents ranging from $7.75 all the way on page 6 and 7 of the different properties. We got one for $6, $6.75, $7. And there's just a variety that we have continuing on. I am now on page 8 for the subject property. Subject property has not experienced any vacancy in 2020 at this time. And then below is a summary of all the leases that we have in place for this property. Once again, I'm showing leases from $6 to $7.75. I'm now on page 9 of my brief. Everyone following with me right now? Okay. Assuming that the potential net income for this property we have is $506,541, which works out to a blended rate of $7.16. Potential rent is $506,541, using a 3.5% vacancy. Using expenses for 3%, the shortfall rate of $385. We come up with a net operating income of $464,618. Utilizing a cap rate of 7.5%, we come up with a value of $6,195,000. However, as you can see below, the net income that they've reported is $495,000. What I've done here is I've gotten a range of comparables that are all within the subject property location. Because there's 8 different units that are located here, I got smaller sizes. The sizes for the similar units are in between $3,600 and $21,000, and the rents I have are from $675 to $10. The oldest lease that we have here is from 2016. And that concludes, then we're looking at a value of here of $6,195,000. If we look on page 12, here is a quick summary of the cap rates that we have for industrial properties. Cap rate we're using is 7.5%, which is a bit higher than the ones listed here. So we're looking at these properties here for industrial. We have single tenant A, multi-tenant B, industrial A, industrial B. We're using 7.5%, which is slightly higher than what we have here in the model. And it's slightly higher than what the industry leaders such as Colliers, CB Richard Ellis, and Cushman Wakefield Field. Based on this information, I am comfortable with the value of $6,195,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jared, any questions?
I do. I have a few questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Froelich, have you visited this property?
I've driven by it.
Okay, so then you're aware of the peculiar siting of the property and the irregular parcel. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because there's a small frontage and visibility from clearance is not similar to what it is. And it's actually shown on the picture there. So if you look at the bottom of page 4, you can actually see that that the frontage is very small.
So can we agree then that the visibility from any major or main artery is extremely limited, almost non-existent? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, which is reflective on the higher cap rate that we're using for this property.
That's fine. And we're not arguing cap rate on this file, so I'll leave that to subsequent files where it comes into issue. But I see that you've included the rent roll here. Did you consider any of the actual leases in place when you were reviewing this property for the purpose of our exercise today?
No, what we've done is based on the, what we've done here is this is a model driven rate that we've used. But as you could see with regards to what the rents that we have here, it's within the range. Like the range is from $6 to $7.75. And we're using 716. So it's almost right where, we're pretty much in the middle.
And on page 9, I think I heard you say that the net income just to me is it's I can barely read it here, but you're not suggesting that the net income reported here ought to be the same as what we use for assessment purposes. There's no shortfall or vacancy included there.
Well, the net income is based on the actual net income of the property, which includes the base rent, which includes all the recoveries, which include all the expenses. So when I see it and what makes these complicated sometimes is with regards to mortgage payments and all the different sort of parameters that take place with regards to with a REIT. But in this situation here, our reported net income is less than what they've reported on their actual books.
Right. So for our purposes, the number that's important to us is the potential net income, isn't it? That's what we're really looking at, because we're not. These are two. Their reporting and our workups for assessment purposes would be different because there's no shortfall and there's no vacancy. And if we follow your logic here, then our net operating income would in fact be higher than our potential rent, which doesn't make sense. Would you agree with me on that?
Would I agree with?
Yeah.
Well, like when you look at the potential rent, it is slightly lower than what's been reported. But what we're looking at is the overall value for the property.
Okay.
And we do feel it's fair.
Right. Okay. I've made my point. On page 9, I'm looking at the modeled rents. Now, you did mention that the owner is a REIT. So if the rents are modeled, would you in any case defer to the actual site-specific performance of the property as opposed to deferring to the model? And is there anything in these modeled rents that stuck out to you as peculiar, let's say?
Well, the one notice that I did have, and just is that the one standout item for this is that our lowest rent is $6.96 for the largest space. And that $6 space is for 31,000 square feet.
Right.
So that's the one that sticks out to me.
Okay.
But what I also sort of look at over time is that you're dealing with probably, so that's the one that sticks out to me. But the point is, it's just the majority of these units are smaller ones. So if you have one unit that's very larger than all the other ones, to me, that's a bit of an outlier and not so much reflective of the building performance and whatnot. Because if we were actually wanting to use actuals, then we'd be using a 0% vacancy. We never use a 0% vacancy. But the point is, if you want to use actuals for the rents, then you should probably use a vacancy or a lower vacancy rate for
market vacancy,
for the value.
Vacancy over the life of the asset.
Well, and when I looked at the vacancy history for this property, 2014 it was 0%, 2017 it was 0%. So this has been a high performing building.
Okay. And we're not adjusting the vacancy above market. Now, just back to this larger space, the one space that's 31,685 square feet, the model is assigning a rent of $6.96. However, we have spaces here at 6,587 square feet, so substantially smaller, and the model is suggesting $7.23. Based on the performance of the property, do you not think that those economies of scale assigned by the model are far out of whack when we review what's actually happening in this professionally managed owned property? Does that not strike you as odd?
Well, not when I look at the comparable at 14 Chevrier, my third comparable. We're using a rent there of 19,890 square feet, and that rent's $7.
And what goes on at 1400 Chevrier? Can you tell me what the use of that property is?
Well, they do building products.
Okay, and just very quickly, the one now, frankly, these rents, they have higher ceiling heights, to be certain. And the one that stuck out to me was Buffalo. That's a life insurance building, isn't it? Isn't that what
No, we have it as a named what's the name of the license of the insurance company?
it's called? I'm not sure. I don't have it. I just have it written down that it's life insurance, but I looked it up yesterday. Regardless, okay.
Yes, I have the name here, but I'm not too sure.
So your comps are higher than the model. The model is higher than the contract, but you're deferring to the model, just to be fair.
Yes, we are.
Okay, and you've applied a vacancy and a vacancy loss of 3.5%. Where in your submission is there evidence supporting that vacancy rate?
No, based on the timeliness of this procedure, our briefs are condensed. And what happens is we look at all the market industries with regards to what they're looking at. And so what happens is that we've actually increased the vacancy a bit from the last cycle. For the Southwest quadrant, the vacancy was 2.5%, and it's gone up to 3.5%.
Okay, but just to be very clear, the answer to my question is that there's no submission supporting this vacancy rate in your brief. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And same question regarding the expenses. Do you have anything to support a 3% expense ratio?
No, we do not.
Okay. We agreed to the cap rate of 7.5%. So those are my questions, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Thank you. Bob, any questions?
I think they've all been asked, really, as far as I'm concerned.
That's fine. Gisela?
I'm just wondering when the pictures that you have in your submission were taken.
Oh, they're just from the website, just what I was able to locate on the web. I haven't done a personal inspection of this property.
Thank you.
I just have one comment and it's with respect to Jared's questioning. Merrick's comparables on page 10. All those buildings are older than the subject property, correct? Correct.
That's correct. Sorry.
And with the exception of the one on Fennel, Buffalo Place and Chevrier all have lower average wall heights.
That
In the
is
subject.
because our average wall height's 22 for this property. So there's only one larger than 24.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions. And Jared, you can proceed on your presentation. And I think that after Jared makes his presentation, we'll deal with the rebuttal, which will then apply to all of the properties.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Although we're not disputing cap rate for this property, so should we?
No, that's fine. We have
Okay.
that information.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Our property is at 1249 Clarence. The property was built in 1976. It has a leasable area of 70,724 square feet, and it has a fairly low by today's standards land to building at 3.06 to 1. I visited this property on July the 3rd in preparation for this docket. So I have viewed it, and I do note that it has an issue with visibility. Now, the main thrust of our argument today is going to be based on the rents. We're using the actual contract rents in place. There's no reason for us to believe that those contract rents are atypical or outside of what the market would demand. And we would suggest perhaps that the siting and the location of this property would lead to a lower rent. Now, I've included a page on or a photo on page 6. Now you can see the red balloon there from the Google map.
Now, let us just get to page
Oh, I'm
6.
sorry.
Yeah.
Are you all there?
And we're all there.
Okay.
Yes.
On the top photo, if you look at Clarence Avenue, now it has a Clarence Avenue address, but it has a long drive past a what I'll call a storage compound before you actually get to the two buildings that are on the site. So I think that on some level that may be why the model rightfully captures the higher cap rate, but we should also recognize that there's a slightly limited or more limited pool of tenants who don't require visibility and who might be considered more of a destination type business. And I have it here once again. It might be easier to see on page 7. You can see that drive up, that long drive. And I was there and can confirm that this is true. Again, these are 2 single-story industrial flex warehouses. The first improvement was constructed in 1976. That building includes 39,010 square feet of leasable area, and it does have 22-foot wall heights. The second improvement was constructed in 1979, and this building includes 31,900 square feet of leasable area. There were 2 smaller additions of 420 square feet and 2,250 square feet, and those were constructed in 1999 and the year 2000. So this property was, for all intents and purposes, built predominantly between 1976 and 1979. I note that the assessor does not adjust the effective year built for the asset, claiming that the effective year and the actual years are between 76 and 2000. And that's true, but we should be cognizant of the fact that the preponderance of the space of this property is indeed built in the mid to late 70s. So we've provided you with our rent roll. The assessor is suggesting an overall rent of $7.16 per square foot. The actual performance at the reference date is $6.62 per square foot, or $468,074 per annum. We do not believe that these rents are outside of the market. The owner is a knowledgeable and capable property owner and manager, and it would be, I think, erroneous to suggest that the model would have a greater level of expertise in the potential rents being achieved in this property than the owner themselves. In terms of vacancy and collection, we've applied a vacancy rate of 4%. We've outlined how we've determined this rate in our CAP study. We'll speak to the CAP study in greater detail where the capitalization rate becomes more of an issue. But we do recognize that 4% is reasonable, because we do also consider that owners would have some consideration towards collection loss. In the southwest quadrant, we're seeing vacancy at 4% in Q3 of 2020, as reported by Capital. So 4% is reasonable. Our shortfall rate is not in dispute. Now, in terms of the non-recoverable expense allowance, you've all been provided with our non-recoverable expenses. You all have heard our presentations, but I will summarize once and ask that my comments carry forward to the balance of the docket, Mr. Chair. That's fine. That's fine. So again, I will not belabor this. You're aware of this. But non-recoverables are non-reimbursed costs borne by an owner in the competent ownership of an income-producing property. It's not a management fee. Management fees are separate and apart, and are typically recovered unless the tenants are on gross or semi-gross leases. It is a stabilized expense ratio that represents expenses that are not recovered under any circumstance. Now, prior to the previous cycle, the assessor followed the methodology that we're suggesting be applied here today. The assessor in the past has rightly pointed out that, quote, even with net leases and competent management, there still will be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants. Example of these are processing payments and chasing bad debts. They've also said that the net operating income is equivalent to the potential annual rent plus vacancy plus other income less non-recoverable operating expenses. We believe that this is appropriate and consistent with principles rooted in appraisal and valuation theory. The appraisal course materials state that the appraiser should account for non-recoverable expenses. The most important non-recoverable items to be aware of are, of course, space marketing costs, which include inducements and leasing costs, and allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. Our submission also includes examples from other jurisdictions in Canada. It's fairly fulsome. It's a long document that I've provided you with, but I assure you it's all there, and I'll leave it with you for your perusal. The most interesting part, the most telling part that we've of our submission here today is that we've done a study of operating statements for the years 2018 through 2020. We've taken a sampling of properties with considering to leasing commissions, professional fees, asset management fees, and advertising and marketing costs. When we exclude tenant inducements, the average is 6.64%. And the median is 5.98%. When we include tenant inducements, for interest's sake, it's 10.66 at the median. On average, and a median of 8.6. So these results are very similar to the research exercise that we completed in the previous cycle for the same purpose. So from our perspective, this fully supports the 5% of the effective gross income, which is lower both than the average and the median without inducements factored in. The 2% that we've dedicated to structural allowance is also supported by our study. And then we're not talking about cap rates yet, but just to be clear, all of the cap rates in our study do include consideration for the 5% non-recoverables and the 2% structural reserve. And when we remove the non-recoverable expenses, it does have the effect of adjusting the cap rate of 30 to 40 basis points. So there is an inverse relationship between removing the 5% non-recoverable and an adjustment to the cap rate. And we have actually included that. We've included an exercise so you can see with assumptions what happens. This is on page 11 of our non-recoverables.
I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just dealing with
Sure.
subject property.
Okay, but we are talking about non-recoverables, and the assessor's using 3, we're using 7%. And it's supported by our submission. And again, when you remove the non-recoverables, it does have an effect of adjusting the cap by 30 to 40 basis points. So based on our submission of the non-recoverable expense allowance, we do submit that a 7% non-recoverable expense ratio is appropriate. So with all that being said, with acceptance of the cap rates of 7.5%, our value is calculated as 5,426,875, which we then round to 5,427,000. And we do respectfully submit that the value for assessment purposes for the 2023 cycle not exceed that value. The balance of my brief includes the city value, the city's workup. You'll see our main point of contention once again are the rents, vacancy. Although they're 3.5, we're using 4. It is still in contention. And the expense allowance, the assessor has not included any evidence to support their position of 3%. We've conducted a study where we're suggesting that 7% ought to be included. The building details are on page 17 of my brief, and that supports the construction dates and square footage figures that I've presented to you. And the balance are income and expense questionnaires, which support our potential net market income. So once again, we do respectfully submit that the value of this asset at the reference date not exceed $5,427,000. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Merrick, any questions of Jared?
Yep, on page 18 of your brief, and I'd like the panel members to take a look at this as well. How much is the recovery of the management fees?
The recovery of the management fees that are reported on the owner's statement here, 37,046.12.
Okay, then a bit further down, what is their actual operating expenses there for management fees?
Right, so you're suggesting that they cancel out 30,741.
Well, they're actually making a profit off management fees off of that.
Well, they're not making a profit. Those are in commercial real estate, Mr. Frolick. Those fees are estimated typically at the beginning of the year, collected from owners, and then credited back. I think we might need to go over how these income statements are applicable. Secondly, the management fees, as I've suggested, the non-recoverables, as we're talking about today, we've attempted to stabilize these fees over the life of a property. So in a year where there are no marketing costs, where there are no leasing commissions, those fees may be very, very low. But in periods where there is vacancy and that vacancy is cured through leasing commissions, that number will be very, very high. So our point is not to spike that ratio every year with the performance of the property, but rather to look at the way that we would look at vacancy and suggest that we stabilize it over the economic life of the property. And that's why we've used 7%.
So would a 6 years vacancy history of the property be reflective of the economic performance of the building?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So during the past 6 years, based on the information that I found, actual vacancy has been 0%.
And are you suggesting that the economic life of a property like this is 6 years?
No, what I'm saying though is I'm just doing, if you're doing a pro forma where you're looking at the actual performance of the building, you always have to factor in vacancy. But the point is we're using 3.5, even though the actual is 0 for the past 6 years, yet you're asking for 4%. So I find that to be a bit.
Well, I think we both agree that we should use a market vacancy. I've provided a study to support a 4% market vacancy, and the city has not provided anything to support a 3.5 vacancy. And I think that you've agreed with that.
Yeah, because of the nature of this is not a municipal board hearing, so the nature of this is quite slow, quite a lot faster. Okay, non-recoverable expenses you were talking about. So we're using 3%. What's the non-recoverable cost for the property for owner expenses?
Right, I think we've just gone over this, but again, on this statement, they're very low. But again, it's 1,538 I'm seeing here. But again, in periods where, hold on, Mr. Pollock, in periods where there's high vacancy or where vacancy is cured with a lease, and if the lease is a higher value and longer, then those charges would be very high. In years where there's no leasing, there's no space marketing costs, again, it would be very low. Once again, the way that we treat vacancy is similar to the way that we treat non-recoverables. We look at the entire economic life of the property and we try and stabilize over the economic life of that asset. That's supported by our study, that's supported by appraisal theory. And as far as I can see, the city has not submitted anything to support their 3%.
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, any questions? Yes, you use the actual market rents being paid by the tenants.
Correct.
I noticed the lease start dates, some of them are quite early. They're usually generally 5-year leases. Some as early as in 2015.
That's correct.
But you are stating that they really reflect the lease rate that should be in effect in the calendar year that we're using.
Absolutely. So if you look at the what you're looking at here on page 11, on the far right, it says stepped rent, yes or no. And then it says if there's a step, then when does it start? So actually, even those leases signed in 16 and 15, the rent that's being applied is based on the step at July of 19, May of 20, December of 18. So those are leases that were agreed upon at a certain time. Again, the owner is someone who knows the market quite well, and this is where the step up occurs. So we do believe that it's a big market.
More for step ups.
Absolutely.
You stated too, there was a problem with visibility of this property.
Absolutely.
Are the businesses in this property of a nature that they're retail in nature, they require visibility by the public?
No, I think it would be best to describe them as more sort of destination utility. They don't require like you're saying, visibility the way that retail or
Like
retail
drive-in
warehouse.
trade or walk-in trade?
No,
That's not
no, it's
part of the businesses in here.
no, and I think that the rents reflect that, and I think the assessment department has rightly captured that in terms of the cap rate. But there's very low visibility, but it's not a they wouldn't be looking for tenants that required walk-in traffic or high visibility from a main thoroughfare, to be certain.
So in that sense, visibility is not an issue.
Well, it may be an issue on a fee simple perspective on a go-forward basis. If you were a purchaser of this property, you might recognize that there might be a whole swath of types of tenants who would not find utility in this property for storage, whereas if they did require what you're suggesting, which is correctly. So I think that is the visibility issue and the siting and the irregular parcel. Typically, that is captured in the cap rate, which we're not really disputing today for this property. But I think that sometimes we look at when we look at a site specific basis, the assessor uses a model, we use a site specific basis. When we look at these rents, we say, well, this makes sense that they're well in line with the model. The only thing the model is kind of from our perspective is getting wrong is the economy of scale on a unit that's over 30,000 square feet. So does that make sense? That's sort of our perspective. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gisela?
I think my questions have been answered. Thank you.
I think mine has too. Thank you very much. So that concludes 1249 Clarence. And I believe both parties agreed that we would now address the issue of rebuttal.
Sure.
Okay, let us just get there. So we'll start with the assessor's rebuttal evidence first.
I think to rebut something, we need to look at Mr. Story's information first, and then I'll be reviewing that because
Well, you both have rebuttal, so which is it?
well, no, Mr. Story has presented in his brief a cap rate study. So he should provide the cap rate study first, or we should move to the next property in my eyes. And then I would be reviewing the cap rate study that's been provided by Mr. Story.
You have a problem with this?
However you'd like to proceed, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll hear from Mr. Story first, and then Merrick, you're on.
Okay, thank you.
So we have provided a industrial cap rate study. We know that there's no study similar provided by the city. There are no sales provided by the city. However, we've looked to the market for at the reference date of 2021 in preparation of the 2023 assessment cycle, and we've looked to determine what has happened with cap rates. We've looked at the brokers' reports. We've looked at the market in general. And our methodology is that we will use the same methodology to determine our cap rates as we would to value a property. I think that's important. And that's put forth in page 3. This is from the appraisal of real estate. It says the appraiser must make certain that the net operating income of each comparable property is calculated and estimated in the same way that the net operating income for the subject is estimated. So that's all to say that the sales that we looked at when stabilizing and determining the cap rates, we use the same methodology. Again, we based on the IAAO standard for verification and adjustment of sales, we recognize that sales between relatives or corporate affiliates ought not to be included. Properties should be exposed to the open market. The asking and selling price should be within the range that any party purchasing the property would be expected to pay. And the properties should be open market and arm's length transactions. We don't typically look at partial interest sales. Those would be suspect. And acquisitions or divestments by large property owners, such as pension funds or real estate investment trusts that involve multiple parcels, typically should not be considered for analysis. So we don't look at portfolio sales. sales and leasebacks or other special financing conditions would raise a flag in our study, and those would be excluded as well. I have my section on vacancy. We reviewed the Johnson report that starts on page 5. This supports our 4% across the board. Generally, if there are properties that have long-term vacancy issues, we would look at the vacancy the way that a prudent investor would, and we would suggest that an adjustment upward to the market vacancy may be applicable in some cases, but typically we have used 4%. Now, page 8 from the Johnson report shows that 2020 December multi-tenant investment vacancy by district shows an overall city vacancy rate of 7.7%. Now that may be high. Inkster may include some portion of the Northwest may include some portion of Centerport, which may buoy that number some to a higher level. And then right below that, it shows a single tenant investment vacancy by district overall at 2020 at 7.4%. However, we've also looked to brokers' reports. For example, what I have in front of me here, Capital is showing vacancy in the Northwest at 7.9%. Again, that may be high based on the inclusion of Centerport. In the West, 4.7, Southwest is 4.0, Central, so the downtown, effectively the older assets, the warehouses, have a lower vacancy rate at 1.5%. The Southeast is 4.6 and the Northeast is 6%. So with all of that taken into consideration, we do consider vacancy as well as collection loss, so bad debts. And we have used typically in this cycle 4%. We believe that's supported, if not optimistic. We do note on page 12, there was a report released by the city of Winnipeg. It's called the Employment and Commercial Land Study. The objective of the study was to provide an update on the city's commercial and employment lands and the needs up to the year 2036, and to make recommendations on how the city's land use policy should be updated. The conclusions of this study were that surrounding municipalities have taken advantage of growth opportunities stemming from improvements to infrastructure such as roads and servicing. So effectively, this is the economic principle of supply and demand. We don't disagree that there's demand for good quality industrial space, but our what we're learning and what the city is telling us in their study is that there's competition from the RMs. They've outpaced the city in terms of developing that land, and so the supply is migrating on some level to the RMs, and that's something to keep in mind. At the time of the study, the city of Winnipeg had 47 acres and an additional 65 hectares or 161 acres soon to come online. In contrast, the capital region had 116 hectares or 287 acres of service lands and another 203 acres for future servicing. So we do note that there was a substantial development in the rural municipalities, putting pressure on vacancy, rents, and inherently the risk profile of properties within the city of Winnipeg. So that's included here for you. We've also looked at the brokers. The brokers are telling us that Colliers is saying the 2020 year average for industrial aids should fall between 6.25 to 7%. Q1 of 21 is saying again 6 to 6.75. So we do see some compression there, and we've included that in our study. So that's what we're seeing as CBRE. Telling us the 20-year average similarly 6% to 6.5, so slightly lower. That's for aid quality. So that's the latest, the greatest, the best, high wall heights, strong covenants on the leases, good tenants, high land to building. Not some of the older industrial supply. Majority of the industrial supply that we see in Winnipeg would be considered older and not meeting the exact market standards. So we do see a range. Now, these broker studies do not typically include non-investment grade properties, so that's to be considered as well. CBRE is saying in Q1 of 21, 5.75 to 6.5 for the A's. And for the B quality, 6.5 to 7.25. Cushman is saying 5.5 to 6 on the A's and 6 to 6.5%. Now, all that being said, the average 2021 compression in cap rates for Class A industrial should be somewhere between 25 to 50 basis points on the higher quality assets. And the compression for Class B industrial should be 50 points for higher quality assets and 0 to 25 for the lower quality. In terms of the non-investment grades, some of the under demolished stock, as it were, we would suggest that 8% as a starting point would be reasonable. And we have a table that I believe Mr. Froelich is going to try to rebut, but here are our sales on page 17. 100 McPhillips, 110 Sutherland, 160 Eagle, 1221 Sherwin, and 58 Hutchings. Now, given the atypical nature of the global pandemic, sales were not as abundant, and clean sales were slightly harder to determine. But we have looked and done our research as best we could, and actually the sales that we're seeing support what the brokers are saying and support what we've said in the past. Our compression makes sense based on our previous position. All this to say that our table that we will be using this cycle shows that Class A properties should fall somewhere between 6 to 6.5%. Class B should fall somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5%, and non-investment grade maybe somewhere in the 8% range. Further to the base cap rates, that's assuming good quality, good covenants, and good locations. We do look to site-specific adjustments. The purpose of the exercises of the Board of Revision are to provide the board with information on the site-specific basis, and there are some factors that should be considered. We've included our factor table on page 18. We consider location. Location, of course, being the greatest driver of value in real estate. So location and external factors. Now, these are generally recognized in the stabilized NOI, but there may be future changes anticipated. We would adjust the cap rate accordingly. These external factors may be proximity to rail lines, caveats that are affecting potential development potential, and the overall area within which the asset would be located. Site size, of course, also affects development potential. A large land to building ratio is a positive. We would consider that a decreased risk, while a low land to building ratio may restrict expansion possibilities. So 3% and under would give us pause, and we may increase the cap rate on that basis. The land condition, topography, zoning, environmental concerns will increase risk, to be certain. We have a property today that's considered either contaminated or impacted. We would accordingly adjust the risk profile for that property. Building size, large single occupant buildings over 100,000 square feet bring the additional risk of vacancy, proportionate vacancy on a property that size. You may have either zero vacancy or 100% vacancy, and the pool of potential tenants is much more shallow. So building size is considered. Building condition and age life, shorter economic life or expectation of non-typical repair or improvements may increase investor risk. Configurations and layout, again, the strength of the covenant, the quality of tenants, and the history of the types of tenants that are competing for the space, as well as the lease term. Shorter leases clearly carry higher risk. The income forecast and the durability of income. If there's a potential for income growth through improvement, we would see a decreased risk. A risk of declining income due to unfavorable market conditions, supply outpacing demand. Again, I referenced competition from the capital region. These are factors that may increase risk in our analysis. And regulatory factors. So heritage designation, for example, particularly when we're looking at some of the older properties in downtown, that may impede development if there's a caveat on title. With the heritage restriction, depending on the severity of the restriction, that would be a risk to the owner. The balance of this study or the appendices supporting what I've just summarized, and I think those are the high points of the cap rate study. So again, we have provided a table. We're suggesting cap rates ranging from 6 to 8%. Stratified by class. Class A, again, 6 to 6.5. Class B, 6.5 to 7.5. And non-investment grade would typically be 8%. And that is supported, we believe, by our sales, the brokers, and the market conditions in general. And I thank you.
Thank you. Merrick, any questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions, please. which area in Winnipeg has the newest industrial properties in terms of effective age or building years?
I'm sorry, which in terms of the,
So which industrial area is the most desirable in the city of Winnipeg at this time?
if you were to, if, in terms of what industry are we talking about?
Well, what type of properties derive the highest rents and the lowest cap rates for industrial properties in the city of Winnipeg? What area?
That's, if I may just interject here, that's a pretty broad question.
Okay.
You narrow it or rephrase it?
Okay, so let's look at it this way here. On page 5, or on page 6 of the agent's brief with regards to the vacancy study, we talked about their adjustments that they've made, and they've used a 4% versus our 3.5%. Did you, okay, and so looking at the total vacancy rate over the past 5 years for Fort Garry, because the subject property is in Fort Garry, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any 4% vacancies in the past 5 or 6 years for Fort Garry?
So this is the Johnson report.
Yep.
You're referencing the 10-year average, and they're suggesting 3.5%, but I don't believe they're factoring for collection loss. Is that your understanding?
You know what? We're looking at vacancy. We're not looking at collection loss on this. We're just looking at.
So you're suggesting that an investor would not consider collection loss and an overall vacancy when making adjustments, when making an investment decision, they wouldn't consider collection loss?
Well, they would consider a variety of factors, but
Okay.
the point is the documentation that you've provided here, does your documentation show your collection loss, or does it just show vacancy?
Oh, so we talk about collection loss, actually. Sorry, we talk about, okay, vacancy and collection loss, page 10 from the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, 4th edition. Vacancy and collection loss is defined as an allowance for reductions in gross potential income attributable to projected vacancy, physical or economic, that's important, and potential collection loss considerations. Vacancy is an expected loss in income as a result of periodic vacant space attributable to unrented space and tenant turnover. Credit loss considers non-payment of rent and can consider units rented at below market rates, also known as lag vacancy. Vacancy and collection loss is usually estimated on a property-specific basis as part of the reconstructed operating statement in the income capitalization approach, and applied as a percentage to potential gross income or as a percentage of rentable area of the property, and may also refer to a study of vacancy and collection loss in a defined market or submarket. So, according to the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, when we are conducting our analysis, physical vacancy is one aspect to be certain, but collection loss should also be considered. Does that answer your question?
Well, you just went over a definition, but I don't think you did, but that's fine. So, but in this property here, what has been the vacancy loss for this property during the last 5 years? Because you're just because if you're doing a site-specific evaluation for the market rents, shouldn't you be doing a site-specific evaluation on the vacancy?
We're using a market vacancy. Now, in order to understand the vacancy over the life of the asset, you and I both would have to look at the asset since 1976. I don't think either of us have done that. I think we were very close in terms of our vacancy. I've supported my 4%, and you've not provided anything. So,
okay, so you've used the Johnson report for your vacancy. So for multi-tenanted, information here. So you haven't done a 5-year average for multi-tenanted vacancy analysis here. You've used your 4%, and that's your be all end all with regards to, despite the data here.
What do you mean?
Over the last 5 years for Fort Garry.
We're suggesting that the market vacancy in the city of Winnipeg, when considering collection loss, may be higher than 4%, but what we're comfortable with on a stabilized basis Excluding any other extenuating circumstances, it's 4%. And I think that's been asked and answered, but
How come you haven't included any vacancy analysis from Colliers, CB Richard Ellis, or Cushman Wakefield in your brief?
I suppose.
Well, I think, wait a minute, just ask questions on what he submitted, not
Okay,
why.
fair enough, that's fine. Okay, on page 12, you have a list of cap rates from Colliers, CB Richard Ellis, and Cushman Wakefield. What is the reference period of time for the 2023 assessment?
Sorry, page 12 is the industrial land supply, which
Page 14, sorry, page 14.
right. So we're showing you the compression cycle over cycle. Have you read this document, Mr. Perla?
Well, if you answer the question, okay, I asked you a question, please
Right.
answer it.
Yeah, and I'm telling you that this is for 2017, and this is based on showing us what happened in the previous cycle to the current cycle. And the intention of showing this, if you read through it, would show that the compression is supported by our table. The cap rate compression in industrial is supported by the brokers.
So, yes. I see that. I see that here.
Okay.
I see that here. I missed that. I apologize. That is all I have.
Thank you. Bob, any questions?
No, I know. Thank you.
Gisela?
No, thank you.
And I have no questions. So. Just let me see where we're at. So that concludes your rebuttal or your
Cap rates study.
cap rate study, yes. And the non-recoverable expense study.
Yes,
So you've concluded with both of those, just to make sure.
I have. Yes, I will. I will ask that what I've said about those two studies carry forward to the balance of the properties on our document today.
And that's fine. So Merrick, now we're over to your rebuttal.
Excellent. So if you look at, as an overview here, when you're looking at the methodology with regards to market value and cap rate studies, you'll notice a trend. The market rents and vacancy used during the appeal process and during the cap rate study are vastly different. The motivation in the differences here is in one situation, you're trying to lower the assessment as much as possible. And the next situation is you're trying to increase the cap rate as high as possible. So what I've noticed here is I took three of the properties on the Altus's cap rate study, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview on what just happened. One of them we agree with, and two of them we notice that the methodology can be questioned. And I want to present that to the board so this way they have a good understanding, because one of the reasons why cap rate studies, we don't provide a lot of cap rate studies, is due to time constraints, and they're complicated and they're very subjective. And so at the end of the day, the default position with regards to it is our overall market value fine with regards to that. And one of the reasons that we'll look at is we'll look at a sales value per square foot. Are we being reasonable in our approach? So the first one I'm looking at here is at 100 McPhillips. Property sold for $2.1 million on September 29th, 2020. Our assessed value was $1,932,000, and it was cut to $1,634,000. Below that, you'll see on page 2 that
just we're not bound by any previous board decisions. Just
this is just for information purposes. I understand this completely. This is just showing the discrepancies in the approach to value or how these cap rate studies are developed. So we have $2.1 million. So what ended up happening here is on page 3, which was done by another agent. The process used by agents for cap rate studies and appeals are very different. Here was the agent's valuation process in 2020, and here's ours. So if you notice the difference, the agent used $4.75 rent. the city of Winnipeg used $5.57 rent. For the cap rate study used by Altus, I'm on page 3, which is the top part of it. Says Stevenson's Advisors and the city of Winnipeg 2020 assessment.
Okay, because your pages aren't numbered.
No.
Yeah, you know what? And that was the issues that I had this morning, so I apologize.
Okay, well, then you'll have to lead us by the subject that you're discussing. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we have here is for the appeal process, the agent used $4.75. The city of Winnipeg used $5.57. And for 100 McPhillips, in the cap rate study, they used $6.75. For the vacancy analysis, the agent and the city of Winnipeg both used 6%. However, in the Altus cap rate study, they used 4%. So there's a difference there. So then meanwhile, as we go through the documentation here, they've increased the rent. So if you lower the rent, the cap rate will drop. But with a higher rent, the cap rate increases. So in their analysis here on the bottom of this page here, they've derived the cap rate of 9.16% for the subject property to come up with $2.1 million. In our analysis, our model analysis, we used 557. The agent used 475 for the agent, yet for the cap rate study, they're doing 675. Why could there be such a range of rents in this process here? And the motivation in doing this can be seen in the following. Here's an example how numbers can be adjusted to support a position. The appeal agent used a much lower rent to derive a lower assessed value. So in the valuation that the agent was seeking on the left-hand side for 100 McPhillips, they used a market rent of 475. They used shortfall of 375, 5% for management, 2%. They used an 8.25% cap rate to come up with a value of $1,155,000. For the sale had taken place in Altus's cap rate study. They used a much higher rent, $2 more, which is significant. They dropped the vacancy. And then subsequently, the net operating income increased threefold. $192,000 in net operating income versus $128,000 will significantly affect the cap rate used versus the sale price. So what ended up happening is that the value was $2 million, which is how they came up with the $2,100,000 roughly. So what I've done here on the next page is I said the city of Winnipeg valuation or cap rate, how we would come up with the cap rate versus Altus. So notice how the drop or the increase in rents impacts the cap rate. So I'm using our original model rent of 557. The agent has used 675. I've used our vacancy of 6%. The agent has dropped his vacancy to 4%, all in the process of increasing the net operating income. So if you have the net operating income of 160,000 versus 192, when you take that versus the sale against the sale price, the cap rate significantly affected here. So what has happened here is I'm pretty sure it's not seen in this example, but it will be seen in the next example, how the rent and vacancy will impact the cap rate in this analysis.
How is this going to help the board? Like, where are you going with this?
The cap rate, essentially what I'm saying here is that the cap rate, as a summary, the cap rates used by Altus is not a reflection of marketplace, because the rents that they end up presenting during the board of revision process and with regards to the cap rate study are vastly different.
But it's not relevant for the previous assessment cycle of what was presented. The market is not reflective of what's happening as of April 1st, 2021.
But what has happened here is that the cap rate study both uses the parameters that were used for the previous cycle. So what ends up happening here is that the cap rates that were developed usually use the previous year's cycle moving forward.
You know what? We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess.
Okay.
Just the board. Thank you very much. We'll reconvene the hearing. Merrick there?
No, he's very distributed.
Hi there.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, excellent. I guess it automatically mutes it when we stop it.
I don't know how it works.
Anyways, so right now I'm on the next page with the header is 110 Sutherland.
I'm just gonna try and
I will expedite this process here because cap rates are very complicated. I'm mindful of this.
well, not only that, these are properties that are not the subject of this hearing. And they're from previous assessment rolls.
Yeah, but the methodology is important because
And I think we're not here to evaluate the methodology. We're here to evaluate whether the assessment is reflective of the market value of the subject property.
but cap rates are a component of that. And when you have such a discrepancy between cap rates and some of these properties, and they need to be pointed out on how they did their analysis and how they did ours. I will quickly go through this because how I look at it is from 110 Sutherland. We were at the previous cycle, we were told we were not supposed to do owner occupied properties for cap rate studies, and we had done that. And so subsequently, I just wanted to show that 110 Sutherland was an owner occupied property and a cap rate study was developed.
Again, that was a previous cycle, and
Yeah, but the point is, at the cap rate study here is that what I'm providing here is that they've come up with a cap rate of 7.93% for a property which sold very close to the reference date.
but it's not
2020.
property.
No, but the point is the methodology, because our cap rate was 7% and their cap rate's 8%, almost 8%. So, and there's a reason how this is, how the agent presents their information and how we present ours. And so that's why I've gone through the time and energy to show.
And rest assured, the board will place the appropriate weight on the evidence submitted.
Oh, well, so, and that's fine, but the point is, 110 Sutherland is a part of the applicant's brief. They've created a cap rate study that we don't agree with. And I just wanted to show the history of that. So you could review it if you wish. I understand that we need to expedite this process as quickly as possible, and I will do so moving forward for the rest of this morning's appeal. But in the same regards, it's important to notice why the discrepancies exist between what we use for a cap rate and what the agent uses. And in a nutshell, for the very last cap rate that for 58 Hutchings that was used here.
You want to go to the last cap rate?
Well, no, because I just like, just as a summary here, on cap rates are important, and they're an important part of valuation process. But if you manipulate the rents to derive a higher cap rate, for the previous cycle for 110 Sutherland, the applicant had no problems using our model generated rates of $4.81 for the appeal. For the cap rate study, they used a market rent of $5.50. That has a huge impact on how a cap rate is derived. And so that's why, and I just want to share that. So if you end up looking after our brief in the agent's cap rate study and how we done this, we both come up with the $2.5 million sale, but the cap rate is a percentage difference. 58 Hutchings, the 6.5. So this is it is it's the last page before this one. So this is the next page, and it's the last page here. For 58 Hutchings, our cap rate study was within a quarter point of Altus's. Altus's uses 6.5, and we're less than a quarter of a point with regards to that in our cap rate study, which we used in our model. And so, and what ends up happening here is for this cap rate study on 58 Hutchings is more reflective of the cap rates that were used in 2020 versus 2023. The issues with regards to the cap rates, they haven't gone up. But based on Altus's information here, they have been. And this can be seen with regards to going the rest of my brief. So, you know, lots of information with regards to industrial rents improving, a lot of rates on cap rate studies. If you look at the CV Richard Ellis, I have the Canadian cap rates investment highlights. There's the Winnipeg section that says Winnipeg trends. Industrial cap rates are, I don't know if you guys are there or not, but they show on the right-hand side, they show downtown rates, suburban rates, industrial A and Bs. The ranges for A-type properties are 5.75 to 6.5. On 1249 Clarence, we used a 7.5% cap rate, and there was no issues from the agent with regard to that because of the different issues on there. All market industries, on industry reports that were done in 2020, which wasn't included in the Altus's brief, is that, you know, increased optimism moving forward with regards to the industrial marketplace. A lot of good news. Davidson Young says, even though the industrial sector has not been 100% COVID proof, the performance of industrial assets showed resiliency in 2020. Industrial vacancy finished at 3.9% for the city of Winnipeg. It was 3.6 in 2016. All market evidence here shows that industrial has been booming. It hasn't had some of the other effects that some of the other areas have. And if all the experts are saying that industrial sector has been resilient and robust, why would the cap rates increase? And so moving forward here, cap rates haven't increased based from 2020 to 2023, but based on the information provided by Altus today, it contradicts this. That concludes my rebuttal, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Jared?
Yes, just a few comments, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask that the board place very little weight on this submission. There are a number of things I'd like to get to. I think you mentioned them now. Just lastly, you're suggesting that Altus is saying that cap rates are going up. I think we've very clearly showed that there's compression. That's in our study. If you would have reviewed it, I think you would have seen that. We've included the market reports by the brokers. You've suggested that we haven't included them. We have. Further to that, in your you've included a number of previous assessments, information from previous cycles, and you're comparing a different firm's workup with our stabilization on the first page. Why have you included that? You're saying, yeah,
it shows the trend on how agents will provide a different value.
Okay. That's enough.
Okay.
We've heard enough about cap rates.
I will.
And I said before, the board will place the appropriate weight.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That concludes the rebuttal evidence. So we're going to go to the next property on the docket, which is 10 Irene Street. Merrick, you can make your presentation.
Thank you. File number is 22-095. Roll number is 03070988 500 10 Irene Street. Assessed value in 2023 is $3,594,000. The reason why this is important because during the 2020 assessment, there was a significant cut that had taken place, which we did not take it to the municipal board because it was as a business decision, but the value had cut from $3.4 million to $2,467,000.
That's not relevant.
And it's relevant in terms of the history because in 2018 the agent signed off on a value of $3,098,000.
Again, Merrick, I can't be more clearer on this.
Okay, fair enough,
Their assessments.
fair enough.
We say it every hearing in our preamble. Some of us say it in bold voice. Not relevant.
That's fine. Moving forward from there, and I just, actually, there's one bit of information that I want to go through. Is that subject property was built between 1967 and 2015. We have an overall effective year of 1985. The wall heights vary between 14 to 30 feet. And the leasable area that we have for this property is 36,470. The land to building ratio is very high at 8.55. We have not asked for a surplus land adjustment to be done for this, but we feel that there is value in that land given here. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out the income expense trailer on the second page. It clearly shows that it's owner occupied. What's interesting to note here is that on the income and expense mailer, they receive an income of $6,934,000 for a cell tower. The agent has not provided that, added that income to his workup. Subject property pictures is on page 3. Just some overview pictures. What's interesting is I had this property on appeal in 2020, and there was some discrepancies for the BA appeal. And the first thing I said is that I need to do an inspection of this property because I haven't visualized it, and there's some inconsistencies that we had. So once again, it's in the Port Garry Industrial Park area, and on page 6 you can see actually where it's located at. So what we've done here is we have 2 rents that are listed here. The first rent is of 29,410 square feet, and we're using a rent of $7.95. While that may seem high, what we believe is that almost 12,000 square feet. So in 2015, there was a 12,000 square foot addition done to this property. With that addition that had taken place, a market rent of a 2015 building would be significantly higher than a market rent of a 1967 building, which is why we believe the $7.95 is fair, because roughly a third of the building has been built within the past 6 years. With that being said, leasable area is 36,470. Potential income is 271,016, using a 3.5% vacancy loss. Expenses at 3%, shortfall at 385. We came up with a net operating income of 248,770. Utilizing a cap rate of 6.95%, we come up with a value of 3,579,000 rounded down. We've also added $15,000 worth of value for the satellite tower, because roughly speaking, every year, as shown on the mailer, the property owner is getting $7,000 as a rental rate for the cell tower. So that needs to be considered as a part of the income for this property. You can see that on the bottom here. We use the cost approach with regards to the valuation for that, because there's so many variables with regards to incomes that cell towers receive. What we've done here is we have a series of rents that have taken place from 130 Lawson to 15 Squarefield, some of them in the area. The rents are showing from $7.90 to $11. What's interesting about the Fort Garry Brewing Company is they've done an expansion recently as well, and for a significant part of their building, and that has derived a higher market rent there as well. So that needs to be reflected in the subject property here. We've discussed cap rates. The one point of contention that I do have a recommendation to make, and I'd like to confirm this at an inspection at a later time, but the agent has used a $4 rent for the area of 7,060 square feet. I'm going to respect that, despite the fact that I haven't done an inspection of this. So my recommended value for this property is $3,450,000. 473. So that is all I have, because I want to present that information at the end, because I want to go through my brief. And I feel, you know, it's funny because as I was doing this on appeal, I forgot that I had done this in 2020 for the business assessment appeal. And I have actually have really detailed notes of what had taken place at the hearing. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jared, how do you feel about the recommendation?
I would like to proceed, though I do appreciate the narrower issues away from the unheated space. So I appreciate that, Mayor, and I'll won't question that section, but I would like to proceed, Mr. Chair, just briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Prolick, are you aware that this property is on the impacted or contaminated sites list?
Almost in most industrial properties are under the impacted industrial affected list.
That is not true. Most are not under the
If
contaminated.
you look at the St. Boniface Industrial Park, almost all of them are.
Okay, so I've included it for the board's perusal, included the entirety of the list. You can see that most of the industrial stock is not indeed on that list. In your opinion, then, are you suggesting that an impacted or contaminated property would not carry a higher risk to a next prudent purchaser? Is that fair to say? Is that what you're saying?
Not if it's being used for industrial property. If it was using for a residential property, it would be, but not for industrial property.
Does that impede further development?
Well, it didn't impede the 12,000 square foot expansion that they did in 2015, so I disagree with your comment.
And would remediation costs be considered upon purchase by a next purchaser?
Depending upon the use of the future user, yes, but if it's going to be used as the same current use, I don't think remediation cost should be an issue.
So it doesn't affect the model?
No, it does not affect the model.
Okay. We have 3 buildings of different quality. Does that affect the model?
There's lots of different buildings that have been built over the years for industrial properties due to expansions. It's not perfect, but it doesn't affect the it's not perfect, but it's a common place for industrial properties to have multi-level buildings as buildings prosper and expand.
Yeah, but it would be fair to say it would be ideal if an owner had all of their utility satisfied by one building as opposed to multiple buildings. Is that fair?
Oh, that is fair, yes.
Okay. The antenna and cell tower, that's interesting. So you're including that. Now, some understanding of this. Typically, these come with maintenance agreements. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, and there should be some cost associated with that. Is that fair?
The costs have not been reported on the mailer. So, and if we did a cap rate on the 6,900, it would be significantly higher than the $15,000 that we were attributing to the value of this property today.
Right, because you didn't use an income approach. You used a cost approach that's depreciated it down from what you're suggesting was 125,681. And you're suggesting that the remaining value there is $15,000. That's the contributory value to the site.
That's what we've had there, yes.
Okay, so that must be a very old tower.
Well, sometimes when properties get to a certain level of depreciation, I'm sure the people who own a satellite tower, they do the adjustments for it, but we haven't done the adjustments for it on our documentation. But we do believe that there is value in having a cell tower for any potential future owner who'd want to purchase that. And so we want to capture that.
And a potential owner, next purchaser might in fact remove that from the site at a cost to them, would they not? Potentially, if they were looking to
well, there's lots of hypotheticals that take, they could actually put another cell tower there.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about your rents in a moment. Again, nothing submitted to support the vacancy or the expenses, correct?
That is correct.
And nothing submitted by the department for the taxpayer, their agent, or the board to consider regarding cap rate, correct?
We've provided a generalized cap rate study for the board to review. As stated by the board, the process needs to be done as quickly as possible, and we don't go through a detailed analysis of this, but like I said, the detailed analysis that we did on 58 Hutchings, the cap rate was very similar to what we had, and I have no issues with regards to the cap rate study used on 58 Hutchings.
Okay, so in terms of so you're referring to this table where you suggest that all cap rates fall between 5.5 and 7.45, correct?
We have, well, for us, it's 5.55 to 7.45. Yes.
Okay.
That is the 20th and 80th percentile. There may be some that's lower. There's maybe some that's higher.
Okay, so presumably there is a study that was done, but it's not being made available. The city's not being transparent then with the inputs that were used to develop this table. Is that fair to say?
Due to the nature of this hearing, we are being as transparent as the parameters of the appeal schedule allows us to be.
Okay, so just in terms of that study, can you tell me how many properties were inputted into that study to devise that table?
Ooh, I can, but it would be in excess of 25.
Okay, so in excess of 25. How many of them were on the impacted list?
I didn't go to that detail.
Yeah, how many of them were newer properties and how many were older properties?
Well, like I said, it was a general overview. The board members have stated they don't want to go into such detail. And so I'm under oath. I said, we've done a study. We've completed it. We've done a summation of our cap rates in that study. And I have nothing really else to add.
Okay. All right. And just very quickly, in terms of the rents, now we're agreeing that the unheated space ought to be applied no more than $4. Said that's fine. But in terms of these comps that you've submitted, you're aware, of course, that our subject property, the goings on there, the activities are they lease equipment, right? Like front end loaders and skid steers and that type of thing, and that's why they use that land. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of the business. I'm looking at the valuation of the property, and when I see the valuation of the property, I see a huge potential for other industrial development there with this surplus land there. So I can't talk about the business because I've never toured it, and I'm strictly looking at the property from a realty perspective.
Okay, but do you consider the utility of the comparables in relation or relative to the utility provided by the subject when you're developing this rent comparable table, or are all these model derived?
Well, they're all in the Fort Garry Industrial Park. They're all similar type of properties here. They're the ranges that we have. The subject property is 36,000 square feet. We have ranges from 30,000 square feet to 40,000 square feet here. You know, we have wall heights that are some are as low as 12 to some to high as 31.
Okay, would you agree with
subject properties wall height is on the you know, on the 12,000 square feet is let me double check here, is 30 feet.
Okay. So just to back up for a second, would you agree with me though that the comparables that you've used are typically better locations and would have a higher degree of finish? Many of them have office finish.
No, I wouldn't agree with that because they're better locations. So out of the comparables that I've used here, I got 1, 2, 3. I got 3 of them that are within the same area, and their rents are $11, $9.25, and $10.50, and we're significantly lower than that. So I would not agree with your comment.
Okay, and just to be very clear, Squarefield, that's a real estate office. That's not an industrial building, is it?
No, the 42,000 square feet is occupied by a food services provider.
Okay, and on Salto, that's a publisher of books, and that includes a high degree of office finish. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, any questions?
Yeah, it's owner occupied, and these are it's a model rent you picked up the comparables.
That's correct.
And you used the comparables to pick off that rent, did you?
Yeah, well, these and other comparables to derive this market rent, yes.
And your cap rate in industrial, the city of Winnipeg, you calling this industrial B or A or what?
Well, it's hard to say because a third of this property is brand new, right? So it's not truly an A and it's not truly a B, right? So, you know, because in my analysis on other properties that are for brand new properties that end up taking place, the rents that are taking place for newer industrial properties are closer to, $10. And so what I'm being mindful of is like we use $7.95 here for part of the space. Out of that $7.95, 12,000 square feet of that space is brand new. So I think you need to factor in the new space and the overall quality. It has a high ceiling height. And that needs to be a part of the equation that hasn't been considered because I don't see any when I look at the agent's brief, I don't see any newer properties there either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Gisela,
Thank you. I'm good.
and I have no questions. So Jared,
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Okay, and just very quickly, we're talking about new properties. We'll get to my rent comps, but the overall effective year built for this property is estimated by the city as 1985, and we don't dispute that. So many of our comps will be in and around that vintage. So just to be very clear, this property was built in stages. There's something of we'll call it piecemeal construction. It was built in 1967, originally 1969, 1971, and then 2015. We had a variant age online of 79, but I see that's changed to 85. So 79, 85, that's fine. We won't disagree with that. It does have a fair bit of land, but again, when you visit this property, I was there on July 27th this year for the purpose of this exercise. There are a number of Bobcat machines, effectively, that are new and used that are on site for sale or rental. That's what goes on here. Now, in terms of about the site map here, there's a fair bit of land, but we do note, of course, that it is listed as impacted or contaminated. It's on the list, and it's not, as the assessor has said, that all properties are on that list or the predominance of industrial properties. That is not true. I've included that as supplementary. You can see that it is indeed listed there, and you can see all of the properties in the city of Winnipeg. That's public information. So again, we're at 10 Irene Street. This is the southeast corner of McGillivray and Irene. This is the Fort Garry Industrial Park. The total gross building area that we're dealing with today is 36,470 square feet. Now, if you follow me to page 8 of my brief, got a bit of a breakdown. This will be less of an issue now that we've agreed on the $4 rent for the unheated space. We all on page 8? Okay, perfect. So the first building, considered building 1. It's this fellow right here. That's 1 story. It's masonry. It's 16,320 square feet. That's the original building. It has a gross upper area of 17,085 square feet. Gross floor area 17,085 square feet. It's partially heated and it is 18-foot wall heights. 1A, that's the building at the northernmost section, labeled as such, it's 1A. That was indeed built in 2015. It's wood frame. It's 12,325 square feet. Again, 30-foot wall heights. It's heated. It's the new addition that we're talking about. It's about 30% of this property is newer, and 65 or so percent of it is older. It's from the late 60s, early 70s, 69 to 71. Building 2 at the southernmost part of the site on my work up here, my brief, is built in 1971. It's metal frame. It's 6,100 square feet. It has 25-foot ceiling height. So you can see we have a mix of masonry, wood, and metal. These are buildings that are, we might call them utility grade, that satisfies the purpose of renting and selling new and used equipment. The final building is building 3. That's in the bottom left corner. Again, built in 1967. Wood frame, 960 square feet. It's unheated and it's 14-foot wall height. So it's there's a large preponderance of storage space. Okay, so we've gone through there. I have the breakdown, the little blurbs on each building. I've summarized that for you. And again, approximately 29% of the rentable area is indeed unheated. The site is rectangular. Total site size is about 305,300 square feet. That's 7 acres. It does have M2 industrial zoning. And we've established here that the land to building is favorable at 8.55 to 1. However, that land is impacted. So typically it's good to have a high degree of land, but there's a lingering question mark that would give a next purchaser some pause when we know that that land is indeed impacted. I don't have any quotes or understanding of what the level of impact is or the cost of remediation, but suffice to say it should be a consideration in terms of the risk profile of the asset as we take that together with the varying qualities of properties on site and the location. Actually, we do have frontage onto McGillivray, which is positive. However, the only access to the property is from Irene. So as a result, the rear portion of the parcel, the most easterly section, is landlocked. There's no other access. So we have considered that in our valuation. Again, the property is owner occupied. So we have looked to some rent comps. We had to go outside of the area. Based on the size alone, I was not able to find properties with similar land to building, but we've done our best here to look to properties built between 1962 to 1999. They're leases that are reasonably that are well within the reference date, I should say, and we come to an average of 587, a median of 623. So we recognize that there are some positives, there's some negatives to this property. So our best estimate, consistent with our position on this property in the past and as accepted by the board, is $650 per square foot. So that is some adjustment, but we are applying that to the 17,085 square feet of the partially heated building. The 12,325 square feet, again, it's $650, and it appears now that we're not in dispute on the $4 on the unheated space. So all of that taken together leads us to an annual potential rent on a net basis of $219,405, and we've applied that in our valuation. I do note that all of the properties that we've looked at here have a low degree of finish. That was one of the basis by which we searched for comps. Again, it's a very specific property. It wasn't. It was a bit of a challenge to find comps that satisfied the profile of this property, but we've done, I think, a pretty reasonable job by selecting them individually. Vacancy, once again, as we've gone over in our cap rate study, is 4%. Again, that's not meant to be the vacancy at the reference date, but rather the vacancy on a fee simple perspective over the entirety of the economic life of the property. We believe 4% is reasonable. The shortfall is not in dispute. And again, we do continue to apply an allowance for non-recoverables of 5% with a 2% standard allowance for structural reserve. So we have included that in our valuation based on all of the site-specific assets the issues we've talked about with this asset. We are disputing the cap rate. The city is using, I believe, 6.75. That's right. I don't speak. 6.95. I'm sorry. We are suggesting that the cap rate of no less than 7.5% ought to be adjusted. And again, we are, the panel member asked if this was a Class A or a Class B. We would certainly consider this a Class B, given its age, given the issues with the land, and given the piecemeal construction, the preponderance of storage. I don't think you would see this being considered by any of the brokers or our firms as a Class A. So it should fall somewhere in the 6.5 to 7.5 range. Without that new addition, it may be considered non-investment, as it's, again, largely storage and used for the sale and rental of new and used equipment. So 7.5 we believe to be reasonable. That puts it on the high end of Class Bs. We have piecemeal construction. We have the impacted site. We have supply and demand, as I've mentioned, from new industrial product in Winnipeg coming on stream, as well as the pressure from the capital region, which is only accelerating obsolescence of older inventory. As you can see, we have a preponderance of older space here. We have a large amount of unheated storage, and we have wall heights of 14 to 30 feet. 30 feet, that would be considered very good. 14 feet would be considered obsolete. Visibility and exposure, we have good visibility, poor access, so that was considered as well. So we had previously suggested 8%, and we're suggesting, and I want to speak to the fact that we're not suggesting that cap rates are going up, but rather we're recognizing the compression and suggesting 7.5 is appropriate. So given all of those factors taken together, we do believe that the value of $2,536,912 rounded to $2,537,000 is appropriate, and we do respectfully submit that value be applied in the assessment of this property. And barring questions, that's my presentation, and I thank you.
We'll just wait till the traffic goes by. Okay, Merrick, any questions?
Got a couple questions. Did you do any adjustments to the market rent in your evaluation to be reflective of the Fort Garry Industrial Park being in superior location to your comparables?
Well, we're using. Did I adjust it upwards? No, because I know what you're saying. It would be superior to Inkster, to be certain. But again, we're looking at on a site specific basis. It's interesting because if you look to Fort Garry Industrial, I think you'd have a hard time finding comps that have a low degree of finish and this much land. So short answer, no, but not without reason.
Is it common for a market rent to be higher if there is a land to building ratio which is superior than normal?
A land to building ratio would typically be considered a positive, to be certain. The land here is impacted. That's a negative, to be certain. There's also the issue here of having to maintain a great deal of older, what I'm going to suggest is low quality space. So with all those factors taken into consideration, I do think that our rent is not out of line.
So there are no adjustments there?
Well, when I say no adjustment, when we look at the table, I suppose you could say it's an adjustment. Our average is 587 and we're using 650. So we are using our best judgment. But that would be, it's based on, I suppose it would be a subjective opinion as opposed to a mathematical calculation, if that's your question.
Yeah, but the discrepancy between the square footages of your market rents and my comparables are so high. At least 50% of my comparables are in the Fort Garry Industrial Park and yours are not. And so I was just wondering why you were not able to find that.
Yeah, so the problem would be that I wouldn't use a property with this degree. So, okay, for example, the brewery, I haven't been inside, but you mentioned that it had been expanded and renovated. So that rent would raise a red flag to me. I would consider if there was any sort of inducement or equipment included in that. So I would probably investigate that further. The logistics firm on Debates, just visually, it's a far superior property. I haven't inspected it, but it looks to be in better condition objectively. It's also a 20-year lease, which I'd look into further. Salto, again, that's a publisher with a high degree of office finish. I would not suggest that would be comparable to somebody who's renting heavy equipment. The real estate office on Sturfield. So
it's not a real estate. The tenant space for 42,000 is okay. Is there's an office component of it, but there is significant amount of warehouse space there. So
we can agree though that storage space and a rental equipment rental desk would not be finished typically to the same degree as a professional office or somebody who's doing book publishing or real estate or so. I think it's just based on my quick analysis of your rents. I'm going to suggest that they are superior. I also know the one on Buffalo, and I know to be certain that's a higher quality property. So I don't think it's appropriate to use properties with higher degree of finish when looking at the site specific nature of our subject.
Okay, but when you say site-specific nature, so what sort of management fees are there attributed to in the owner-occupied property?
Well, this is an owner-occupied property, so we don't.
Would there be any management fees?
So are we looking at a fee simple valuation of this property? Is that our exercise?
What we're looking at here is we're looking at the property value as it is right now in its current use, because you clearly stated here that we need to only consider this in its current use. We can't look at it at other considerations. So it either has to be.
That's not what I said. I didn't say that. I said that the utility that's being provided to the owner right now, that the present physical asset is a rental yard and office, a rental desk for heavy machinery. That's what I'm suggesting to you. Right.
So is there any retail space there or office space? So what percentage of the property is retail and office?
There's a low degree of finish, to be certain, and it is nowhere near the degree of finish that you're suggesting in your comparables. That's the.
But do you have any of these pictures in your brief to show us the level of finish?
I don't.
Here. Okay, so let's take no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
No, I don't think I have any questions.
No.
Thank you.
And I have no questions. So that concludes 10 Irene Street. And the next one is 55 Henlow Bay. Any preliminary issues?
Not on my end.
Oh, Merrick?
No, actually, Mr. Story and I talked about this property beforehand, and he had come up with a value that my value in our discussions, our preliminary discussions, and I don't know if Mr. Story's opened this or not, because his currently values at 3,617,000. We had discussions with Mr. Story be prepared to accept a value of 5,865,000.
So it's currently 6.283. And I'm sorry, Mr. Pollock, you're suggesting 5,865,000 as per our discussion.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, I will accept that pending client approval for the record.
Okay, so you're recommending a reduction from 6,283,000 to 5,865,000. Panel members, do you have any questions? Bob?
No, I don't have none. Thank you.
No?
Thank you.
And I have no questions. So that concludes this property. Thank you very much.
On the order, though, Mr. Chairperson, if possible, can we state that this value was agreed upon by both the applicant and the assessor?
Yes.
Just the reason why I asked this is because from last cycle, there were a lot of properties that ending at the municipal board, me being mindful of the fact that, you know, it has based on client's approval, but I want the record state that it was agreed upon by both parties.
Okay, well noted.
Just because of the municipal board status.
Okay, the next property is just 16 Mazenod Road. Any preliminary issues?
Just wait 1 second, please. Just want to review the property here. What we have here. you know, the only issue here on 16 Mazenode was our rent and cap rate. Is that correct, Mr. Story?
No, we agreed to the rent and cap rates.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it was the management fee and what else?
vacancy and non-recoverables is what we discussed.
Okay.
That will have some effect, I believe, to, well, no, we should actually be fine in terms of the contribution versus prorated share for the exempt space, but I think we disagree on the general quantum based on the inputs, but in theory, I think we're not in dispute on the exempt space for the urban social opportunities.
Just bear with me here for 1 sec. You know what? In our preliminary discussions, we discussed a value of $5,199,000. I'm prepared to offer that if the agent's willing to accept it. And we also have the breakdown with regards to class and liability here too.
Would you mind sharing the breakdown here?
Yeah. The breakdown that we have here is for 40S. That works out to $629,450. And for CC60, we have $4,569,550.
Okay, yeah, we'll accept that again pending client approval, but I'm comfortable with that number. Thank you.
You want to read the record in there, the property into the record, Merrick?
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. We forgot to do that for the last one. So should we go over that as well, or are we okay?
Just briefly read it into the record.
Okay. File number 22-0-1019. Roll number 060530-74300. Property 16 Mazenode. For 2023 for the 60T portion of the property, we're looking at a value of $4,569,550. And the 40 class code S is we're looking at $629,450.
$629,450 for the S.
That is correct.
And the 64,569,550.
Yeah, to come up with $5,199,000.
And again, Jared, you've accepted that.
We accept pending approval. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Merrick, this was my fault, and it was out of order, but do you want to read 55 Henlow?
Yeah, not a problem, Brett. Value that we have, file number 22-1014. Roll number 03-065-21190 for 55 Henlow. The initial value was $6,283,000. And we're recommending a value of $5,865,000.
Thank you very much. And the next one is, let me just get that. 6 Spears Road. And if you want to read property into the record, and you can proceed.
Just going through my property here is file numbers 22-851, roll numbers 06-0931-80400. Address is 9 Spears Road. The assessed value for 2023 is $1,295,000. One-story industrial property. Has a year built of 1982 and effective year built of 1984. We have wall heights of 16 feet. We have a leasable area of 15,400. This property is linked with 17 Spears, so that's why the income and expense mailer was not received here, because right across the street for the subject property is Spears, so that is why they have received the mailer, but they have been compliant in this situation. In 2014, we had a sale registered for this property of $1,073,800. On page 3, I've never inspected this property, but on page 3 and 4, on page 3, we have some pictures of it. And on page 4, we have the workup. So we have 15,400 square feet, utilizing an area of a rental rate of $581, 4% vacancy to come up with effective gross of $85,895, 3% expenses, $385 for shortfall to come up with a value of $80,946. Overall cap rate is 6.25 due to the small size, and to come up with a value of $1,295,000. For comparables in the area, what I've tried to do is I've got some in the eastern part of the city. In terms of effective ages, they range from 1966 to 2013. The wall heights are between 14 and 26 feet. The 26 feet has a much higher rent, but I want to be consistent by having rents in the neighborhood. And my other comparables are showing a $525, $7, and $750 seems to be fair. That can on page 8, we have some additional pictures. And I forgot about this. Just showing you where the property is located at, in the just on the outskirts of St. Boniface by the stockyards. That's on page 8. Page 9 will show some pictures of the space. It's essentially storage space, 585 with the 581 rent. And that concludes my formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, any questions?
I have a few questions. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And we're, to be clear, we're only really talking about the cap rate and the expenses today, so I will limit my questions to those matters. Mr. Froelich, this property has 16-foot wall heights. That's fairly low by today's standards, but typical of its vintage. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. And metal frame, that would typically be considered a lower quality building. Is that fair?
It's I wouldn't say lower quality. Like, there's no office space here.
Right.
A lot of industrial properties have office spaces, and so.
Right. And that would be that's my next question. That would be a negative, wouldn't it? I think you rightly pointed out that it's linked with the owner of 17 Spears. So this is in fact a grain storage warehouse for animal feed, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't have any office area linked to it. We've established that, right?
I've never inspected the property, so I can't comment on that.
And okay, the land to plan though is very low at 2.3. Even for that.
Yeah, I disagree with the premise that the agents use to land to building ratio of this. There's many situations. There's Sobeys, there's Brittany meat, there's Brittany eggs. There's Artis REIT buildings here where they have built their facilities where they don't use the 4:1 building ratio as it is. And so if you actually factor in this property with the other complex on the other side, and let me just double check here, I think the land to building ratio is definitely not an issue for this property.
Okay, so you're suggesting then, if I'm hearing you correctly, that site coverage is not a consideration in the current industrial market in Winnipeg?
What I'm saying though is there's many situations that take place where site coverage is not an issue for a subject property. A clear example of that is industrial strip mall. You don't need to have a 4:1 building ratio for an industrial strip mall. And there's many examples of that within the city of Winnipeg, if there's sufficient parking, because the industrial strip mall is essentially similar to a retail strip mall.
Okay, and this is a storage warehouse.
Yeah,
though.
I understand that, but you're referencing land to building ratio here. And so I don't believe it's an issue here for this property.
Okay, and would you consider this an irregular parcel?
You know what? There are so many odds and end properties in this type of area that
Right.
but what makes it appealing, it is odd, but what makes it unique is that it's so small. And usually when prices are smaller, it allows more buyers into the marketplace, which is why our cap rate is lower than what you're seeking here today.
Okay, and on the city's website, it does rightly point out that there's a negative rail influence on this property. Is that correct?
Well, I think negative rail influence would probably be more applicable to residential homes. I actually think it would probably be a benefit to industrial properties.
So just to be very clear, though, that would certainly preclude further development of the site as long as that's a live rail line, would it not?
But there wouldn't be as towards the potential for redevelopment is not an issue here because the land to building ratio suits the needs of the current use of the building.
All right. So is it fair to say then that so all the inputs on page 4 are model derived? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. And when we look at the rents, we'll skip over that. But in terms of what the brokers are saying, for what we'll call an industrial B, would you consider this an industrial B based on the characteristics?
You know, it's hard to say because like when we looked at the last property that you and I discussed, you know, to me, the subject property that we were looking at 10 Irene was superior than a Class B bottom range. Yet that's what you had advocated for. So I didn't agree with that per se. I think what happens here is that because this property is unique, you can't really put it in an investment category per se, because it's not really a non-investment grade because there's great value and utility of having the space there. And so,
so you've said two different things here. You've said that it's, you're saying that it's not investment grade. I agree with that. This would not be considered an investment grade property, right?
This property is an outlier.
It's an outlier. Okay, and just to be very clear.
But the point is, I don't believe the non-investment grade property is a fair evaluation of a cap rate study that should be used for this property.
Okay, but if we look at what the brokers have submitted, that would put this property in the higher quality level of industrial Bs. Does that not seem odd to you?
What I'm saying right now is that when I'm looking at the quality of the space of the building, we're looking at a value of $84 a square foot. And I don't think that's unrealistic based on other market evidence that we have from a global perspective. I think you can't categorize this property here because a lot of times agents will talk about non-investment grade properties, but there's great utility in these properties. We have properties in the West End that are non-investment grade properties from an artistry perspective, but they carry tremendous value in the marketplace and they sell for tremendous value in the marketplace. So, you know, as we know, assessment's very gray. You can't put, I believe for this property here, you're trying to put a circle into a square and it doesn't work.
Okay, and just not to belabor the point, but there's no cap rate evidence supporting this cap rate in evidence, correct?
Not in evidence, but within the department.
Thank you.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No questions. Thank you. And I have no questions. So Jared.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The property here is 9 Spears Road. It is indeed a animal feed warehouse. It is related to the owner's property across the street. This is where they store the feed. It has a very low land to plan at 2.3 to 1. Now, again, we're not suggesting it doesn't provide utility to the owner. It certainly does. But we're looking at the market value, the fee simple interest in this property. If it were to be sold separate and apart from the main holding, what might it achieve on the on the open market, and what might be the considerations that an ex-prudent purchaser would consider. So firstly, the property was built in 1982. It is steel frame, excuse me. The walls are 16 feet tall. So all of these issues would be considered negative and would give an owner some pause. I was there on August 1st of 2022 and saw the building firsthand. Page 6 of my brief shows you now the assessor included a photo, and that's good. I've sort of zoomed in. It's the same photo. You can see that it is indeed an irregular parcel. So the land to building, though it would be slightly different, but based on what's usable here, we can see that this corner is not usable, and it's predominantly that front loading section. It's gravel, and I think the assessor was correct in saying that there are a lot of odds and ends properties in this area, and that's true when we look at the parcel boundaries. Again, there's no office space or any sort of finishing or office finish in this property. Again, it's irregular. It is zoned M3, and the southern boundary of the property abuts a rail line. The city on their website does show it as an influence. We can only assume that that's considered a negative influence, as typically abutment to a rail line would be an impediment to development. The market rents are not in dispute, but we have provided you with some comparables that support 581. We came to 545 to 585, but in the interest of narrowing our issues, we accepted the 581. We think that's within an acceptable range, and we're not disputing that. Vacancy, this is a rare occurrence here today where the assessor and I have agreed that 4% is appropriate as a market vacancy, and we both applied it. The shortfall is 385, and we do, again, we continue to believe that a non-recoverable expense allowance of 7% is appropriate. And again, I'll ask that my comments regarding our rather fulsome study be considered. So in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about the non-recoverables, and we're talking about the cap rate. The assessor has used what we consider to be a very low cap rate for this quality of property. Again, in terms of investment categories, we do have to try to use our best judgment to determine where this property might fall in terms of its investment grade or potential. So it's certainly not a Class A. It may very well be a non-investment grade property, but we have recognized, again, the assessor has rightly pointed out there's some utility to it. It's a smaller size. There may be a larger pool of buyers for it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not non-investment grade. However, weighing all factors, we have determined that a cap rate of 7.25 is appropriate. Double check here in my. All right. Oh, look at my evaluation page, and it's next. So indeed, we've used 7.25%. We have considered if that range in the Class B falls between 6.5 to 7.5. We've considered that it's 40 years old. It's a steel frame building that is 40 years old. We looked to Marshall and Swift on a life expectancy guide. If this property were considered good or average, the expected lifespan would be for steel frame would be between 30 to 35 years. If it were average or low cost, it would be 30. So it's safe to say that an average useful life of this property before an owner would start to take on unexpected expenses would typically be between 30 and 35 years. This is beyond that range. Again, we talk about factors of supply and demand. As new product comes on stream, we do recognize that some of this older stock, the obsolescence is being accelerated. So we do consider that. The siting and configuration is objectively poor. This should lead to an increased risk. The degree of finish is objectively poor. There's no office suite. We all agree on that. In terms of the location, we would consider this inferior. The land to building ratio is poor. The wall height is poor, and the visibility and exposure, again, is poor. So with all that being said, a 7.25 capitalization rate has been applied in our valuation. And with all the other parameters taken together, we come to an overall value of $1,070,000 at the reference date. We do ask that the board adjust the value to reflect this property's potential market value as of the reference date. And I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merrick, any questions?
Since the sale of July 2014, have investment properties or industrial properties gone down in value or gone up in value?
I have not looked at the sale. That looks like it was some time ago. I don't know the details. If you have any details on that sale or the parameters of it, I'd like to know, but I don't have any, I haven't considered that sale in my valuation, so I'm not sure. I don't know.
So what you're proposing though is that has there been inflation since 2014 to 2020 to 2021?
Well,
Here's
suggest.
Apple appreciation.
Okay, so let's talk about assemblage and purchase of properties by adjoining owners. I believe that the IAAO standard says that those sales should be reviewed thoroughly. So if we understand that this owner owns at least 3 properties in this immediate vicinity, did they own the other properties at the time that they purchased this? And if they did, would they have paid more for it? And have you looked into that before including the sale in your brief?
Well, I have looked at the sale.
Okay.
It was an open buyer and open seller sale that had taken place for this property. And the premise that you're suggesting that this property go down to be reduced by $800 over the period of time of 7 years is, I find it ironic.
What?
In terms of the valuation for this property.
I think what if we have some sort of background on this sale, then we can talk about it reasonably. But if you have an owner who owns at least 2 properties in this immediate vicinity, this is outlined in IAAO verification standards of sales adjustments. It says that those should be investigated, because there may be some undue influence where an owner would be induced to purchase this property in order to A, control the land surrounding them, or to they would maybe derive more utility than some other purchaser. So it's a sale from 2014. I haven't considered it. It doesn't sound like you have any information on it, so it's not been considered in our opinion.
No, I disagree with that comment, but no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Giselle?
No, thank you.
And I have no questions. So that concludes this property. Next on the docket is 1687 Dugald Road. And are there any issues on this?
Not that I have.
Garrett?
Nope.
No. Okay, Merrick, you can proceed.
Yep. File number 22-1033. Roll number is 06050226,000. 6000. Address is 1687 Dugald Road. Property is 1 story, built in 1977. So it's actually older than the subject property. Ceiling height is 20 feet. We have land. We have a leasable area of 19,500, and we have land to building ratio of 6.5%. And we're asking for the assessment to be confirmed. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out the income and expense mailer. And here they show the breakdown of it. This property is owner occupied. And the property sold, September 5th, 2018 for $2,600,000, which is lower than the assessed value that we have for this property here today. And it's within the reference period of time. What do we have is it was a good sale, knowledgeable buyers and sellers. Property talks about there's an with regards to the sale of what had taken place. The actual sale had taken place, it looks like February of 2018. There were no chattels. There's an exercise of purchase with an optional lease with the seller, but that's not been reported because they be reported as being owner occupied. It's used as for auto body for the Patterson Group. It talks about some permits that they had done after the work had been done. Properties in fair condition from their perspective. And the property was bought with cash on page 4. Property was paid for $2,600,000. Here's some information with regard to the status of title on page 5 and 6 with regard to the sale on the bottom of page 6, showing that it's been registered as a sale for $2.6 million. We've got some exterior pictures of the subject property. It does look to be in good condition. Another point of consideration that needs to be considered here, while it's not included in the property owner's income statement, the previous owner on the top of page 7, it's just I think it may be the same, but I think there's a billboard there for advertisement, and the previous owner had been deriving an income for that billboard. And in the past, he received, in 2015, he received $4,500 for the use of that, for the rental of that billboard. What we have here on the next page is we have the market rents that were being used. We have 19,500 square feet, using 158,115 to come up with a blended rent of $8.10. Vacancy loss 3%, expenses 3%, shortfall 385 to come up with a value of $1,146,519. Utilizing a 6.5% cap rate, which does not seem unreasonable based on the sale price, we come up with a value of $2,254,000. In the sales mailer, there was nothing stating us that there were any other chattels or anything else to be included in the sale. What I have here for comparables is I'm showing rents, that are mostly in the northwest quadrant, but they're similar to the Dougal Road property because of the fact some of them are on major thoroughfares, the ones on King Edward and Century and then Sargent. We have groups of rents there where the leases are between 15,000 and 23,000 square feet. Subject properties 19.5. We have wall heights between 15 to 20 feet. Subject properties 20. And we have rents from $775 to $975. We've discussed cap rate information. I am open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
I have some questions. Thank you. So, Mr. Froelich, you said you reviewed the sale of this property?
Yes, the department did.
And you consider it to be a non-arm's length sale?
That's based on the information that I had here when we did the research on that, when I did a company search to see who was the initial owner for this property.
Mr. Chair, I want you to the board to page 3. Mr. Froelich, question 3 on the sales verification mailer. It was asked of the purchaser, was this sale an arm's length open market transaction? And the purchaser said no.
Okay.
Is that correct?
That's what it says here. But when we looked at the information provided with regards to the numbered companies were vastly different. But I did the company searches for both of these.
But okay, but then when I go down to the where it says if no, was the sale between related parties, court ordered, or subject to unusual conditions? The buyer said exercise a purchase option under a lease with the seller, correct?
Okay.
Okay.
That's what it says here, yep.
So would you not be precluded from using the sale in your analysis? The tenant, this looks like a lease back, right? He's claiming it's a non-market transaction. So I guess my question is, why are you using the sale? If they're telling you
because we're not using the sale as the assessed value. We've placed a $300,000 premium on the lease back option for this property. Looking at the comparables that we have here that I've shown, they support the market rent being used. So we're not chasing the sale. We're not asking for $2.6 million. What we're saying is based on market evidence that we've presented here. So if you go 2,600,000 minus 2,254, there's a premium of $346,000 that has taken place. And so we're mindful of the sale, we're mindful of the situation, but we're not chasing the sale. We've provided information with regards to the cap rate. We've provided information with regards to the rents. And I don't believe it's unreasonable.
Okay. But you, sorry, I'm a little confused because I think you said you didn't know that it was non-arms. If you knew at the beginning of your review of this property that this was not an arm's length open market transaction, would you have submitted this mailer into evidence?
The point is I would have, because it shows that the sale is with two different properties, which is why I included the title search on this property.
I think my questions have been asked and answers. Okay, that's fine. Now you have the status of title. That was very interesting here. Is that there's an easement on this property, is there not? There's a caveat.
Yeah, which isn't uncommon.
And that's a hydro easement?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a rail line abutting the back of this property, is that correct?
Yeah.
And does that affect the risk profile from your perspective? This property
there's many hydro lines and rail lines that are within industrial parks, so no, it does not.
Okay, so there are easements on other properties. That's to be certain. But if provided with the opportunity to not have a caveat on title based on an easement, would the principle of substitution not dictate to you that it would be favorable to not have this easement on the property? Is that fair?
Well, that is a fair comment, but the point is when you're in an industrial park, you're going to be expecting to utilize city services, right? So
And we've looked at a number of properties today. None of those had hydro easements to our knowledge, did they?
We didn't pull the titles on them. I'm sure some of them do.
And in terms of,
as you had mentioned before, the last property on Spears had a rail line behind it.
right, but this is a caveat on title. And in order to address this caveat, it would be very difficult to, unless some major change happened with the hydro lines.
Well, in all fairness, I believe there are a substantial number of properties in Winnipeg that have these hydro shades.
Okay, but to be fair, this one does, and we also have a rail line influence. That's all I'm getting at. Okay, that's fine. Mr. Pullock, you said you looked at the front of the property, or you looked at the image. Have you visited the property?
No, I have not.
Okay. Now, so you're not aware, did you, in the sales mailer, it says that they spent some money recladding the front and adjusting the shop doors, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Fair enough. And
yeah, because there's permit values of just under $375,000 that were done to the properties after the purchase.
okay. And on page 7, I'm sorry, how much did you say was done to the property?
Just under 375.
It says there was $47,000 done to the property.
And then, yeah, but there's a permit that was taken out on March 5th of 2019 of $310,000 where they did some interior alterations, which would probably increase the effective age of the building. So the effective age of the building should be higher than 1977.
And that's not in evidence, correct?
No, but I'm under oath. And I think that should
okay.
something.
Okay. And then on your page 7, that's where we see that that impact at the back, the northern corner. I think that's been you mentioned that, so that's fine. And again, nothing in terms of cap rates for us to discuss from the city, save for this very broad table. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you. Bob, any questions?
No, thank you.
No, for me, thank you.
And I have no questions. So Jared, you can.
Dugald Road, 1687 Dugald. We note there was a purchase from the tenant from the landlord. We are not considering that sale as it was recorded as non-market. We've been over that. The original age is 1977. The department is suggesting the actual age is indeed 1977. The zoning is M1. I believe this is the only M1 property on our docket today. The most common of the industrial zonings, and it is a tilt-up metal frame property with wall heights at the apex of 20 feet. I was there on July 31st to have a look at the property. There's a sort of an unpaved type compound area, but it does have a fair bit of land. We do note that the city record, as per my brief on page 6, suggests that there's a negative influence by the rail line, and there's also this section of, which I believe would amount to a hydro corridor that's impacting the northernmost tip of the property. Again, we're at the northeast corner of Gournay Drive and Dugald Road. This is the Dugald area, Dugald neighborhood in the larger Transcona area. And again, we've got a gross leasable area of approximately 15,065 square feet, and it is warehousing and manufacturing space. 1,535 square feet of main level office area, 1,535 square feet of mezzanine level office area, and then 1,500 square feet of cold storage. So we looked to comparable rents in the area for properties such as this. And we looked at the assessor's rent of $8.10, and we believe that that is reasonable. Our best comps were slightly higher, but we're in better neighborhoods, and we're the buildings were objectively superior. They were slightly higher, so at $8.10, we think that's within reason. So we have accepted that in our valuation. We've used 4%, as we've used across the board. So we've mentioned today in all the properties as supported by our study. Shortfall is not in contention. Non-recoverables, again, we do continue to believe that 7% is appropriate and have applied that figure in our valuation. We do take some issue with the assessor's cap rate. We are suggesting a cap rate of no less than 7.25%. And again, some of the properties on Dugald Road, I think it's fair that we can say that they would be deemed to be inferior to some of the other industrial properties in the city of Winnipeg, and objectively less desirable. We have an original age of 1977. Supply and demand continues to be an issue. We have a low degree of finish with some office on a mezzanine, which is not ideal. Quality of construction is rigid steel. Of course, due to the access to transit and infrastructure is considered inferior, and the wall heights range from 13 to 20 feet. You can see that it's a sloping, something of an A-frame. So we do see wall heights from 13 to 20 feet in that building. With all of that taken into consideration, we do believe that a cap rate of no less than 7.25% should be applied. And I will mention just lastly that again, our non-recoverable expense allowance study, as we've summarized here and in each brief, we do note that our cap rate analysis is invariably based on the inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable expense allowance, along with the 2% standard structural allowance. And if the board does choose to reduce or eliminate the 5% allowance, then by necessity, the reduction or elimination would involve an adjustment to the ultimate cap rate submission. And typically that would be 30 to 40 basis points. So we do point out, just as we start to wrap up our docket today, that if you do not believe that the 7% ought to be applied, then there should be some adjustment to the cap rate. However, all that being said, with a 7.25 cap and an NOI of 132,751, we come to an indicated market value at the reference date of $1,831,052, rounded to $1,831,000, and this is largely based on an adjustment to the capitalization rate and the inclusion of the non-recoverable expenses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Merrick.
Were you inside the building?
I have not been inside this building. No, I haven't.
So for the majority of these properties here, when that we've had on this docket today, have you been inside the majority of them, or have you just inspected them externally?
I've done external inspections. I've looked at any photos that we have on file, and I've looked through all of our files to do an analysis of them.
So have you considered doing a cap rate analysis on this property based on the sale?
Again, the sale is between related parties. It is non-arm's length, and it should not be considered. So no.
Have you factored in the income from the signage with regards to that's on the subject property?
No, and typically I think that if you were a purchaser, I don't think that you would consider that signage revenue would continue in perpetuity. We see different zoning laws that happen all the time. I don't think that just because there is signage revenue that it would continue in perpetuity. So no, I haven't considered it. And I think that it would be wise for a purchaser to consider that it may not be an income stream in perpetuity. That would be my answer regarding billboards and signage.
But if there's an income stream available to a potential owner, wouldn't they want to maximize that income stream and continue to have a sign there to derive income?
Okay, but there's regulations around zoning that change all the time. We've seen less and less permissibility of that sort of signage. So again, if I were purchasing a property that had some signage revenue, I would consider if there was a maintenance contract in place, and then I would also consider whether or not I thought that was a durable income stream. So I hope that answers your question.
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Gisela?
No, thank you.
I have a question turning to page 15 of your report. I am looking at the second line. You're showing a leasable area of 39,425 feet.
Sorry, on page 15 of my submission. Oh, yes, it should be. I don't know what happened there. The OFS, which is also in here. I corrected, that's 19,500.
Okay, and then further down in this report, you're missing the shortfall rate on the total.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, okay. So it looks like, okay. Apologies. So we would come to then, shortfall's too high. So actually it should be 1,881,000, I suppose, that first level. And, this is just occurring to me now. I'm thinking about Pattison Outdoor advertising. That billboard may actually be related to the company. So I don't know that I know that Pattison Group is a number of business interests. So I don't know that would necessarily carry forward. Just to go back to a question asked by the assessor regarding the billboard. So
okay, that was the only question of clarification. Then
thank you.
And let's move to the last one on the docket, 196 Paquin Road. And I understand there's a preliminary issue on this one.
That is correct. With regards to non-compliance.
Okay, make your presentation read it into the record and make your presentation on non-compliance only.
File number is 22850. Roll number is 06053. 098,000. Assessed value that we have for this property is 1,571,000. Property is unique. That consists of 3 buildings. It says 1 story. Actually, your build is between. Oh, sorry, I just got into a thing. I actually wrote this down here for some strange reason. Okay, because. Jarrett and I had conversations on this property. So I'm just going through my non-compliance. I'm on autopilot here, and I do apologize. So looking at page 2, what we have here is that the property owner has been non-compliant. On page 2 is the first letter that we had sent on April 15th, 2021. On top of the second page is an example of the mailer that went out. On the bottom part of it, it had a due date of May 6, 2021. On page 4, it shows the second letter that's sent out. That was a registered tracking number that was sent out on June 9th, 2021. And so what has happened here due to COVID and so many people working from home, There's the tracking number. We've not always been able to get a signature for this, but this property, the envelope was delivered. And for non-compliance purposes, the total that we received out of all the non-compliance letters is 1,675 letters that we've sent out do not have signatures. Due to COVID-19, Canada Post were unable to get signatures. In these cases, AT&T was provided with delivery documentation and our delivery reports, including the delivery had occurred. On the next page, on page 6, the property owner had been providing income mailer information prior to 2019, 2020. And 2021, we haven't received any, but they were compliant in the past. That concludes my information with regards to compliance.
Okay, thank you very much. Jared, how do you respond?
So we're not, do not accept the penalty. We're going to ask that the board consider not applying it. I spoke to the owner. Their entire admin team was working from home. This was, if we look at the date, this is 2021. COVID is in full swing. Their entire team was at home. I see here that, and I appreciate this, Mr. Prolick, that Canada Post was not able to get signatures, but effectively we have no record of receiving this from the owner. I don't know if it was left in the mailbox. It was, I don't know. We don't know. They were working from home, and I guess on balance, when we look at these scenarios, I would ask the board to consider the previous behavior of this owner. They have typically been compliant, and I would ask that we not apply the penalty based on the fact that there was a fairly extenuating circumstances with the global pandemic, people working from home, and no record of receipt or delivery. So.
Okay, thank you. The board will take a short recess and deliberate on this issue. Thank you very much. We will reconvene the hearing, and the panel has reviewed the assessor's request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation under section 53(3) of the MAA, and the board has granted that request. And given that, Jared, you will make the presentation, followed by the assessor.
Okay, so the property is 196 Paquin Road. The roll number is 0605309800, file 22850. The property again is located at 196 Paquin Road. It was built between 1989 and 1990. The leasable area is 10,760 square feet with a site area of 62,932 square feet, leading to a land plan of 5.84 to 1. Current realty assessment is 1,571,000. And we visited this property on July 31st of 2022. We do note, and you'll see when looking at the photos, that the property has what we'll consider a super adequacy. Typically the wall heights are 15 feet, but there is one section that has 65 foot wall heights. So that is clearly outside of the realm of what would be considered desirable or usable for most participants in this industrial universe. So we are suggesting that would be considered a incurable super adequacy. Okay, so that's basically the property details. It is zone M2. They're claiming that it's masonry, but I believe it's a combination of masonry and steel framed by my exterior review. The property is owner occupied, so there is no rental information available, but it has been valued by the assessment department with an overall model rent of approximately $8.89 per square foot. So we've gone to page 11. We're referring the board to our following lease indicators. We have sites on St. James, Dugald, Dublin, and Durand. They indicate an average of $7.35 with a median rent of $7.50. However, we do recognize that this is an atypical property, and we've been I'll suggest somewhat optimistic by applying a rent of $8 per square foot. Now, property number one has a low degree of finish. It's a better location. It's zoned M2, but it does have 28-foot walls. So high walls is what we try to look for. I would suggest that perhaps Durand is a good comp as well. So I would say 1, 2, and 5 would be our best comps. So with that being taken into consideration, $8 is what we've applied. Again, we note that 4% vacancy is reasonable in terms of stabilizing the vacancy allowance at market over the life of the property. We know that the southeast quadrant of this reference state, based on what Capital was saying, is 4.6%. Though 4% seems reasonable, and that again does include collection loss. The shortfall rate is not in dispute at $3.85. And again, we do continue to apply a non-recoverable expense allowance of 7%. Capitalization rate should fall somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5%. It may be 6.75 or so. We were going back and forth on this, but given the fact that a next purchaser, if they were not involved in the almost exact same business, would likely have to cure that super adequacy of that 65-foot wall height, or incur substantial heating and cooling costs for a great deal of cubic space they likely couldn't use to their economic interest. So with that being said, we've used a cap rate of 7%. Taken together on page 14, we then come to a total value of $1,074,832, which is then rounded to a requested value of $1,075,000. And that is our submission. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Merrick, any questions?
Did you, do you have any pictures of, were you inside the subject property?
I've not been inside this property, no.
So you inspected it, but you weren't inside the property, is that correct?
I visited the exterior of the property. So no, I was not inside.
And so in terms of, do you know anything about the sale that had taken place for the property, you know, in the past, or did you do any research into that?
No, I didn't look into any sales history. I see you've got one here in 2007. I think that would likely be far enough out of the realm of our view to be considered meaningful. I also noticed that your sworn value is substantially below the consideration. So no, I did not consider it.
How many tenants are at 1725 St. James?
How many tenants are at 1725 St. James? I'm not sure, but I believe that, are you driving the fact that that's a multi-tenant building and this is single? That's true.
That is true, yeah. So,
Okay, correct.
so would that be a fair comparable to use?
I think it's reasonable. We're using well, I think that building is, well, I think it's safe to say that it's difficult to find a comparable for a building like this. This is a very specific use. So I think it's fair. I think that we've adjusted to $8 per square foot. And I think that's reasonable.
And you know the history of the appeal for this property in 2020?
We don't typically consider previous assessments or decisions, and so no, I didn't look into that. It didn't color my view of how we should be assessing it for this cycle.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, thank you. I think Giselle.
No, I've got them. Thank you.
If you turn to page 6, wait a minute. Yes, page 6 of the first aerial.
Yeah.
Now, this property appears to have 3 access points, right?
Yes, it does.
One from Debates.
Yeah.
And 2 on Packman.
Correct.
So that space that has, I assume, grass.
Yeah.
Is this property subdividable?
So that's interesting. In the past, the assessment department had considered an excess land adjustment, but we had It had been ordered by the board that it not be considered. I have the right up here, but it was considered additional land. It's best described as surplus as opposed to excess. And by the Appraisal Institute, third edition, it says surplus land is not needed to support the existing improvement and typically cannot be separated from the property and sold off. Surplus land does not have an independent highest and best use and may contribute minimal value. And I believe that I was not the agent handling it, but my understanding is that that was accepted by the city.
Okay, that was my only question. Merrick, you can proceed.
Okay. File numbers 22850, roll numbers 06053098000. We have assessed value of $1,571,000. The effective year built for this building is between 1989 and 1990. Wall heights vary between 15 feet and 65 feet. 65 feet consist of 3680, and 23 feet consists of 5280, and 15 feet, which would be office, I'm assuming, which is 1800 square feet. What we've done in the past is the land to building ratio is 5.85 per se. And this property gets appealed on many occasions. For the agreement that was signed in 2020, we did remove the excess land component to that, and which is why we did not include it in the property. This property does have some value. The surplus land does have value for it, but based on the layout of the building and potentially there is value there, but we haven't done it from an assessment perspective to add value to that. In terms of, I'm now referencing page 6 of my document. So there was a sworn value of $993,000 for this property in 2016. In 2017, there was 2007, there was a sworn value of $925,000. Similar to the agent, I did inspect this property. It was an external inspection. And you can see the uniqueness there with regards to the access and how there is the one area there, which is much higher than everything like that. It could be defined like most people don't want a 65-foot ceiling heights. That goes without saying. It is in a great area. It is in the St. Boniface Industrial Park area. You know, there's excess land, good location, and page 8 shows some pictures of that. We have a leasable area of $10,760, $8.89 to come up with a value once we factor in vacancy of effective gross income of $92,786. We used 3% for expenses, $385 for shortfall to come up with a net operating income of $88,759. This property is owner occupied. Using a 5.65% cap rate, we came up with a value of $1,571,000. On the next page here, I've taken all comparables that are all in the St. Boniface Industrial Park. They're not located on the other side of the city. What we have here, the leases are, we got one lease from 2012, which is lower than the rest, but we got the other ones that are more recent in 2019, 2012 and 2009, I apologize. And, you know, the leasable areas is from 7,800 to 13,000, which are similar to the subject property. Wall height is between, 21 and 26. And the effective ages are from 1988 to 2013. The 2013 rent is much higher at $11.81, which is a lot higher than the $8.89 that we're using. But overall, we feel that the market rent that we've used for this property is fair. That concludes my formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared, any questions?
I have some questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Perolick, you mentioned that most users would not have use for 65-foot wall heights. I agree with that. Does the model consider that?
The model does not consider that. But, it all depends on, there's probably some buyer there. There's probably some utility to that. This is not a typical investment grade building, but the point is, it's a good building in a good location, which is newer.
Okay, so all of your inputs here are model derived, correct?
Correct.
There's a limited market for 65-foot ceiling heights, and you've said that the model does not capture that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you've mentioned some sales here, but these are $1 sales. Is it safe to say those are non-arm's length sales?
Yeah, that is correct, but it's an indication of market value when there's a transfer of ownership.
It's an indication of market value.
But that there's a sworn value assigned to these properties.
Okay, and the consideration in 07 is more than double the sworn value. Does that not raise a red flag to you?
Consideration in yeah, because what happened is when I researched the sale, it included chattels, machinery and equipment.
That shouldn't actually be considered in evaluation, right?
Which is why the sworn value for the building was $925, but the sale was for $1,950,000.
Okay, so but you've included it into evidence and it really has no bearing in our exercise today. Is that fair?
Well, the point is, it has a bearing because the value for the property was $925,000, and you're seeking a value of just over $1 million. So
Okay.
that does have bearing.
Is it safe to say that those aren't open market sales if they're for $1 or if the consideration is less than half of the sworn value or vice versa? Is that
We're also looking at values that have taken place significantly a long time ago.
okay? And you talked about your rent comps and you said they're all in the same area, but actually only Turin is in the same area, isn't it?
Let me double check here.
Hekla's in Oak Point, Omens Creek is in Omens Creek, Goldsby's in Monroe. Is that fair?
Maybe you have the wrong comparables that I do.
If the comparables,
I'm showing Begin debates.
I'm seeing Hekla, Omens Creek, Turin, Goldsby, and debates.
You know what? I think what happened is that when we were working upon this, those are my initial comparables. And my current comparables are different than what I've sent you guys.
Okay.
Well, and the board has the same
Yeah.
comparables that the agent referenced.
Yep. I could send you what I have.
I think it's suffice to say these are all in different areas, and the only one that's applicable.
Well, the point is, it's just I do apologize for that, but I do have comparables that I see in front of me here right now that are this. So,
Well, it'd be impossible to rebut them on the fly. These are the ones that I've researched for the purpose of this. Here,
Well,
so
I don't think we're going to entertain new comparables right now at this hearing.
that's fine. So, just Mr. Chair, suffice to say the best comp submitted here is at $8.32 on Turin. It is in Mission. The others are outside of the area and very little resemblance to the subject. Now, moving on to cap rate. Again, page 11, you're suggesting a 5.65 cap for this property, even though it does have this super adequate wall. Does that not seem out of sorts with how the market might view this property?
you know what? For some potential buyers, for some potential buyers here, they may consider that to be a premium. So it all depends. It all depends upon who a potential buyer would be.
We've established that there would be a limited pool of buyers who would draw utility. So would a limited pool of buyers increase the risk profile for a current owner of this property?
Just give me 1 sec here. Is that, all you need is one buyer to make the sale, and maybe with the buyer out there, it's not a standard property building, but let's look at the assets there. In the big picture things, the area here is the overall area is 10,000 square feet. There's surplus land to have development for this property here. If a new owner wanted to be in that location, they could tear down the existing 65-foot area, which is only reflective of 4,000 square feet, like 3680, and then they could redevelop that. So there's lots of potentials and hypotheticals that you bring to in the valuation process, and this could be something for a potential buyer as well.
Okay, so you're suggesting that the value of this property is as a redevelopment property?
No, I'm saying here is that you're looking at this property here. You have 7,000 square feet out of 10,700 square feet that are under normal industrial parameters.
Okay, so we're talking
A
about,
potential buyer could decide whatever they would want to do for this property for the other 3680.
okay, but that can be said of virtually any property. We're talking
Which
about,
is a part of the process that you do in your presentation, whereby you bring potential hypotheticals, wherein one could say, you say that the environmental impacts of this property would affect future development. So we agree to disagree on some aspects.
we can agree to disagree, but can we agree that on page 11, the broker's reports, these are typically inclusive of higher quality investment grade properties, would suggest that typically industrial B properties would start at 6% or 6.5 or 6.25. So that puts your cap rate on this property well outside of the window of what the brokers are suggesting. Are you aware of that?
That's what the brokers say, correct?
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bob, any questions?
Thank you.
And I'm good. And that concludes this property. We've heard all the items scheduled today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.